Welcome back. Let's continue to bring you live action coming through from Sebokeng Multi-Purpose Centre in the Vaal as 3 children who tragically lost their lives in the Vanderbijlpark taxi crash will be laid to rest today. On your screens right now, you can see the second body arriving. That out of the 3 who will be buried in that joint funeral that's taking place today. The learners passed away on Monday when the minibus taxi they were traveling in collided with a truck. You can see mourning continues in Vanderbijlpark as family, friends and community members alike really have gathered for this funeral following last week's fatal taxi crash. We know that 14 learners lost their lives, and several of the victims, they were laid to rest yesterday, and 3, of course, will be buried today. So our reporter Lopang Alamu and Neri Tlakotsa, they are there. Let me hand over to Lopang at this hour, just perhaps to take us through what is transpiring as we edge closer to the funeral beginning.
Well, the visuals you're seeing here, the families of those 3 learners who will be laid to rest today. Now we've just seen the coffins of 2 of the deceased, Ofentse Jayden, who is a grade 1 learner who was rather, unfortunately for that family, they now also have to be faced with the reality of speaking of their child in past tense. Ofentse Jayden, who is a scholar at Oliver Lodge, and he was a grade 1 pupil. We've just seen his coffin walk in. The first coffin we saw come into the venue was a coffin of Thato Moetjie from Vanderbijlpark Hoerskool, and she was a grade 12 pupil. She's one of those who passed on the Thursday, and she was not one of those who passed on the scene. She was in ICU before she lost that fight. Now we do understand that her injuries were quite severe, and she did not make it. One of the 2 learners who passed on at a later stage. Now we do understand that some of the families of Bokamoso Mokhobo are currently preparing to usher her coffin in, and that will be the last of the 3 coffins that would be seated at this venue. We do understand at this stage that a number of their classmates have made their way to the venue. They are seated at a specific section, and we've spoken to quite a few earlier, and most of them have seen the deceased on the Friday before that tragic accident on Monday. And we also did speak to Sebokeng, who is a classmate and friend of Thato Moetjie, who is the grade 12 learner from Vanderbijlpark Hoerskool, and she really said that Thato was her normal self, her usual playful self, cracking jokes. She was also really happy on the day. They had, in fact, planned an outing for that particular day, and that was not to be for the pupils, as that Monday, Thato never made it to school. Quite a number of them asking why Thato was absent, not knowing what had happened to Thato on her way to school. Now we're expecting the coffin of grade 8 learner Bokamoso Mokhobo to make her way. She was excited to start what her family calls big school. Now that's the grade 8 learner who was really excited to be starting high school, quite excited to be in a school that she's always wanted to go to. Now that is the coffin of Bokamoso making its way to the venue. Now Bokamoso, as I had explained earlier, is one of the pupils whose mother spoke to us on the day of the incident, saying that they actually saw as well on social media that something had happened to their children's transport, and by seeing the registration number of that particular taxi, that forced them to rush to the scene to try and find out what was happening. If our viewers would remember quite clearly, what happened on Monday was that the scene really made a number of people start talking about the handling of the scene itself, where we saw parents breaking those barriers that were set by authorities, trying to identify their children, with authorities failing eventually to contain the scene as a protocol would demand. And a number of these parents would have seen their children in that state, fresh off the accident. And that is why a number of these parents also needed medical attention. Now, this because of the shock that they endured. We then spoke to another parent later on that evening who also said the same thing. The fact that they also found out on social media after pictures circulated, after videos circulated, and they identified the transport that was driven by Ayanda, who's also known as Biggie in the community, Lula, who then ultimately was arrested. And throughout the course of the week, a number of people really curious as to what his condition was, until we saw him on Thursday at that first court appearance. And it really was quite a sad state of affairs for the families who, for the first time since the accident, made contact and face-to-face contact with the man they believe should have taken better precautions in ensuring that their children make it to school safely. At this stage, what you're seeing is the body of Bokamoso Mokhobo making its way into the venue. She too was a grade 8 learner at Vanderbijlpark Hoerskool, and she is one of the learners who sadly lost their lives on the day of the accident. She was one of the 12 who lost their lives on the day of the accident, and she, from what we understand, her mother really telling us that story was that she did not succumb to her injuries immediately, but later on at the hospital. But it was on that Monday where Bokamoso was one of the 11 learners, one of the 12 learners rather, who lost their lives sadly on the day of the tragedy. We are yet to see the start of the service itself, but as things stand, all the families are present. All the coffins have made their way to the venue. The program is scheduled to start at 9, but it seems as though it might start a little bit earlier than anticipated. In fact, one of the things that we noticed was the number of people who actually made their way to the venue. And upon speaking to those organizing this joint funeral, we understand that they had expected 3,000 plus people to make their way to the sports ground, the community sports ground, to come and say the final goodbyes, to come and support the family. We would have heard Elijah Mhlanga, the interview we just conducted with Elijah from Gauteng government, who says that the department didn't need to take out any sort of money. Now that's because of the support that the families have received. Private companies as well as individuals, organizations alike, coming out and supporting the family financially as well. Speaking of support, we also did speak to the Department of Basic Education and just really trying to find out the kind of support the family will be receiving here henceforth. We do understand that a tragedy like this is not one that one can heal from immediately. The family will definitely need support. The classmates, the schools that are affected by the tragedy will need psychosocial support. The educators alike, the members of the communities who really also find it hard to come to terms with the tragedy that has now become what the community of Vaal calls the worst thing to have happened to them since the dawn of democracy, where they have lost so many children all at once. Liesel, I think we'll leave it here for now as we prepare for the start of the service.
Thank you. You really have been painting that succinct picture and bringing us, into the area where the 3 learners are going to be laid to rest today. It is a somber day. It's an emotional day. It's a day of heartbreak. It's a day of reflection and lots of prayer. As you can see, community members alike really coming out in their numbers and large crowds to bid adieu to these 3 learners. 3 out of the 14 who passed away. 12 of them were succumbed on the scene, and of course 2 later died in ICU. Thato Moetjie, the grade 12 learner, was one such a learner who of course passed away a few days later in ICU. Bokamoso, Mokhobo, grade 8 learner, also going to be laid to rest today alongside Ofentse Jayden Vinger from grade 1 at the Oliver Lodge Primary School there. And so as that joint funeral gets underway, we are expected to be addressed by Premier Gauteng Panyaza Lesufi, Gauteng Premier. He'll be in attendance as well. We're just obviously reflecting on their life and their times, the impact they would have had. We heard from teachers, principals, even parents alike, siblings and friends who've echoed, their fondest memories, how tragic it was, how unexpected it was, and also just shone a spotlight on scholar transport, the issues that come to safety, and perhaps also looking at justice that should ensue. We do know that Ayanda Idudla remains in custody, abandoned bail, and is expected to return to court on the 5th of March. The 22-year-old appeared in the Vanderbijlpark Magistrates Court on Thursday, having been charged with 14 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and charges which include reckless and negligent driving, amongst many of the other charges. It's a day of family really coming out to support the grieving families, friends alike, and to also pay their final respects. You can see the coffins draped in, traditional blankets or Spider-Man there for Ofentse, who was just in grade 1. His life having been cut so short, all of the children who had bright futures ahead of them. And so that funeral, it continues in Sebokeng. Our reporters, Lopang Alamu, as well as Nurel Hlakotsa, bring us different vantage points as, we continue to, as we edge closer to that funeral starting there. It's been a solemn moment for the nation at large, also trying to make sense of this tragedy. Lopang, I wonder, you obviously have been covering the story. You've spoken to family and friends and principals. We saw the funerals that happened yesterday. Today it continues as well. When it comes to, how some of the kids are going to be remembered, I mean, they would have made an indelible mark in their families' lives and in the community as well. Any characteristics that have been shared at this point? What type of character, what type of people they were? Ofentse, I mean, he was in grade 1, such a young learner. Thato Moetjie, grade 12. She was expected to obviously look at furthering her studies, tertiary education. Bokamoso was very excited. It was grade 8. She was about to start high school as well.
I was listening.
Well, Liesel, that's really one way of remembering these learners throughout the week, speaking to community members, speaking to their families. In fact, on Monday, as we sat down with Bokamoso's mother, we got to understand the kind of a child that she was. What we know is that the mother just really explaining what happened on Monday morning, where Bokamoso was so excited for school that she wanted a particular hairstyle and in a certain way, and she took almost 30 minutes preparing her hair alone in preparation of her first school day, one of the first days of the new school year. I think, Liesel, the program is here to start, but we'll just monitor that progress. We now know that the choir has made its way to the stage, but Bokamoso was a really bright learner who, from what we understand, her family saying that she was a social butterfly, a people's person, the life of a party, if you may. And we then spoke to the parents of Thato, who also explained to us that she was a grade 12 learner who wanted to make a name for herself in the arts industry, who wanted to make something of her life. The emotional scenes that you're currently seeing, a mother says, my only child has now departed. There is nothing as heartbreaking as the community of Sebokeng has seen since the tragic accident on Monday. In fact, quite a number of people saying that it might be really early on, but how then do we prevent such from happening? How much more do we then say to all those who are responsible for carrying the future of South Africa in their cars, taking them to school on a daily? How then do we ensure that such a tragedy does not happen again? How then do we ascertain the fact that all scholar transport drivers, in fact, all South African drivers alike, adhere to the rules of the road? When you put the visuals that you're seeing currently next to the visuals that you saw on Thursday in court, the 22-year-old driver who found it very hard to look up, as you would remember, that appearance, he kept his head down throughout the proceedings, finding it very hard to make eye contact with anybody in that courtroom, avoiding the families who sat right behind him, really confused, also trying to find out if he was in any way hurt. And that's the one thing that the family spoke to us about after that appearance, to say that it seems as though this driver saved himself because he seemed okay. He had no visible injuries on the day of his appearance, and now them saying that it's really hurtful that the man they believe is entirely responsible for this tragedy gets to live, and they have to live with the fact that their children have gone for good. These are the funeral services yet to start, but the families have sat down. Emotions are starting to flare over. The atmosphere is quite heavy with grief, with loss, with pain, and a number of these parents finding it hard to come to terms with the loss of their children. What we understand is that this is Bokamoso's family. This is Bokamoso's mother. Now, this is the woman we spoke to on Monday, who said she was one of those who found out on social media that her daughter was involved in this terrible accident. It's really also just quite disheartening to know that there are some people who don't understand the magnitude of the tragedy. You'd notice that she's currently receiving medical attention, Liesl. Really emotional at this stage, and it's for this reason that we keep emphasizing what support do these families then receive after having gone through something of this magnitude. What happens after this? Because one can surely understand that the grieving process will not end today. Now that their children have been buried, then that's the start of the healing process. But what support are they receiving as a family, as a community, as the classmates of these learners, as the educators of these learners? We spoke to Steve Mabona earlier, who confirmed that one school lost 5 children in that scholar accident. It was Hoerskool Vanderbijlpark, which lost 5 learners in the accident, and Al Shaddai, which then also lost 4 learners in this tragedy. Quite a disheartening moment. Now, you would also remember that the process of identifying their children, and some of them had really terrible injuries, and unfortunately those are the lost visuals of their children. That's what they remember, their children, seeing them in that manner for the last time. So seeing them at the scene, then having to go to the morgue to identify them, having to go through the painful process of preparing them for the burial, and now having to face the world as the world joins these families in saying goodbye to these learners, Liesl. I'm not too certain if they can still hear us. We do understand that the music is quite loud at this stage, but that's what's currently happening. Community members continue to trickle in. Most of the venue inside has been filled up, and everyone has taken their seats. We do understand that they're expecting an overflow of people, and they did state that they have contingency plans for those who do not have seats. We do understand that it's really quite a big venue at this stage. It seems as though everyone has managed to find a seat, and those who have not found seats inside the venue will then be asked to sit on the outer side of the venue, but they will then still have access to the funeral program, and they will be able to follow the service as it happens. Liesl, those are the emotional scenes that we find ourselves amidst. Liesl, of course, highly expected, highly understandable at this stage, and those are just some of the family members, the parents, the brothers, the sisters, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins of those who have departed in this manner. Now, we did also speak to the family of Ofentse earlier, who managed to tell us about his character. Speaking of character, Lisa, that conversation we were having earlier, you'd notice that he was a big fan of Spider-Man, and that's one of the first things that the family told us, that he absolutely loved his characters, he absolutely loved animation. And at this stage, that's all the family has to remember them. Liesl, we're going to leave it there for now and take it back to you in studio.
Thanks, Lopang. I know that it's quite an emotional scene that's happening there as we bring you that live coverage today of the three learners who are going to be buried. You know, it's a powerful show of solidarity as community members have turned out in their large numbers in Sebokeng today for the mass funeral following last week's deadly taxi accident. You can see families there, learners, faith leaders, educators, and just local officials. They're gathered to honor the victims. Many of them, I mean, as you know, are children. The community pauses, mourns, reflects, and also prays for those lives who have been lost far, far too soon. Lopang Alamu there, as well as Neretla Kotsa, our reporters on the ground. They really have been bringing us that as the bodies have made their way and as mourners have obviously made their way into the venue where that funeral service is going to be taking place rather shortly at the Sebokeng multi-purpose center there. It's a joint funeral service for the late Vanderbijlpark learners, Thato Moetjie, a grade 12 learner, Bokamoso, Mokhobo, grade 8 learner, as well as Ofentse Jayden Vinger, a grade 1 learner. So as it stands, the program is brought to you by the Gauteng Provincial Government, and it's going to be in 4 parts. Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and of course Part 4, where the burial service will be taking place. It's going to be led by Pastor Lefa Peto, as well as Ms. Lerato Maloka, the executive mayor of Sedibeng. And, you know, there's quite a few opening remarks that is going to be happening. Tributes obviously pouring in from the various family members as they reflect and really pay homage to the life and times of these three learners whose lives have been tragically cut short due to the incident that occurred, of course, on Monday, in that tragic taxi accident that also happening there. You can see it's quite an emotional scene as families and friends, all those in attendance, they have taken their seats and hymns are being sung. On your screens, the atmosphere, it's rather heavy. It's heavy with emotion, as one can only begin to imagine, as people come out to really pay their final respects to the victims. Many of them, of course, very, very young with such a bright future that had now been cut short. So the funeral program is set to begin. It was set to start around just after 8 o'clock now, and you can see the preparations ahead of the opening prayer and then the national anthem that will be taking place. It's a solemn mood, as I mentioned, the family members really preparing to pay their final respects. And if we just look at the learners that tragically passed away, I just want to name them. Of course, they were 12 learners who died on the scene, and 2 of them succumbed later due to the severity of the injuries, who passed away. So Thato Moetjie, grade 12 learner, Sakhwati Mate, Bushle Khatebe, who was a grade 11 learner, Bokamoso Mokhobo, grade 8 learner, as well as Spongile Madonsela, grade 10 learner from Hoerskool Vanderbijlpark. 5 learners, succumbing to the injuries there attending Hoerskool Vanderbijlpark. And then a grade 8 learner who was at the Vaal High School, Liano Muilwa, also having lost their life there. Lesego Sifatsa, a grade 2 learner, attended Oakwood Primary School. Letlotlo Katlego Makwe, a grade 2 learner, was at the Vaal Triangle Primary School. Ofentse Jayden Vinger, grade 1 learner from Oliver Lodge Primary School, who's going to be laid to rest in that joint funeral that is taking place on your screens right now. Lindo Uhle Mabaso, a grade 5 learner from the Noordhoek Primary School. Pihileng Mutaung, grade 11 learner, yesterday, also being laid to rest alongside Lisego, his family member. Pihelo attended Al Shaddai Christian School. P-Man, as he was affectionately known, loved music and loved life at large as well. Puleng Mapala, a grade 11 learner, also attended Al Shaddai Christian School. Naledi Mutsapi, grade 10 learner, also an attendee of Al Shaddai Christian School. And Butlale Lekekela, grade 1 learner, also at the Al Shaddai Christian School. The province, the nation, the community really have been disheartened by, all their loss, and their memories will continue to live on in all the hearts and minds that they have touched during this time, of course, just to hang on to the hope of hope and the promises that their families, that they obviously impacted in their families, in their schools, and their communities. And we're obviously just going to be bringing you that rolling coverage here on the SABC as that funeral procession is underway. I know we also have Nuria Hlagotsa, who's at a different vantage point at the funeral service that's taking place at the Multi-Purpose Center in Sebokeng. Nuria, I just want to check if you are able to. All right, let's see if we can get Nuria on the line, but just, bringing you rolling coverage and different vantage points of the emotional funeral that is taking place as we pay our last respects there. That funeral service, as we continue, perhaps just taking a look at that program. I did mention that Pastor Lefa Peto, as well as Ms. Lerato Maloka, the executive mayor of Sebokeng, they're going to be serving as the official program directors for this morning. And there'll also be some welcome remarks by Sipho Khatebe, the executive mayor of Mfuleni local municipality. Many of the kids love the arts, loved music, so there's going to be a musical rendition that is set to take place following the welcoming remarks, and then messages of support followed by more musical renditions. And then each family member will be paying tribute. There was a tribute by the Vinger family, Miss Mamotse Madlela, as well as Mr. Kladi Vinger. And then there's also a tribute by the Mokhobo family. That's to bid adieu to Bokamoso Mokhobo, who was the grade 8 learner who tragically passed away. And that's going to be done by Mpo Namane and the Moetjie family. There's also a tribute by Elias Mvula Mniwa. Message of support by the Bishop Sikete is also set to follow as they bid adieu to Thato Moetjie, the grade 12 learner. Following more of the musical renditions, each family, each procession has a different protocol, but there's also going to be a reading of the obituary for the 3 learners that have been laid out there. And then Reverend Gift Murani is going to be delivering the sermon for the second part of the program for that Gauteng Provincial Government joint funeral service of the late Vanderbijlpark learners. Part 3, we can see more messages of support. As mentioned, the eulogy is going to be delivered by Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi as well. And there are also going to be messages of support by Cindy Siwe Chikunga, the Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with a Disability. And that's obviously going to be followed by Part 4, the burial service that's happening at the ceremony. Neria, I believe that we have patched you, and you obviously have a vantage point from where you are. Tell us what you're observing as this emotional event continues to play out and family, friends alike come to pay their last respects. All right, I believe we're just going to be in touch with Neria Tlakotsa. She is also at the funeral service, just a few moments there, but you can see our camera is stationed at different points in the multi-purpose center as the program gets underway. It looks like that's about to begin. On your screens right now, Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi, as well as Cindy Siwe Chikunga, Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability. There's going to be a message of support that she will be delivering, and then the eulogy by Premier Lesufi as well. And I think as it gets underway, let's just take a listen in to what is being echoed as the funeral begins. Neria, I know that live scenes coming through from the funeral now. We can hear some of the praise and worship and hymn songs that are being sung as the funeral procession gets underway. I know I want to now hand over to you at this point. Perhaps you can just describe where you are, what you're witnessing, and how the families are holding up, those loved ones, of course, as they come to pay their last respects and bury their children.
Bokamoso, Mokhobo. Remember that these learners died in that tragic car crash on their way to school. I will just give you about Ofentse Jayden Vinger. He was born on 11 September 2019. I'll tell you that he is, when we speak about Bokamoso Mokhobo, she's also was a grade 5 pupil, and also then another one, it is Thato, who was born on 2022, who was actually born rather on 06 February 2009. All dignitaries have already arrived, families have already arrived, and the service is expected to start any time now. I will tell you, this is an emotional and a somber moment as the community is also here to bid farewell. We spoke to the relative of Thato Moetjie, who described how this is a sad moment for them. You must remember, during that memorial service, the families were speaking about how their children died at a very young age, and they had hope that they would pass matric, they would achieve their dreams more than anything. Premier Panyaza Lesufi has also arrived, and we're seeing also NEC for transport who is also here. Various organizations are also here, and specifically that of the Scholar Transport Associations. And you know, this tragic incident brought to the fore the safety of Scholar Transport. And when we speak from guest to guest or Mona to Mona, they're just speaking about how they are also just concerned at the fact that it could have been their children, because their children also rely on Scholar Transport. There is still some praise and worship right now happening here, and we are expecting the service itself and the speeches to start any time now. There will be welcoming remarks by the executive mayor of Emfuleni local municipality. We're expecting a tribute also, and from the Vaal Undertakers Forum chairperson, another tribute is expected from the South African Principal Association, and we have also the musical rendition, which is already underway, and you can hear then all the families will also have an opportunity to say their last goodbyes. The MC is currently telling us that the program is about to start, asking people to at least put their phones on silent as we are about to start with the program. They are telling, of course, that those speakers to at least, keep it short, because we're expecting that at least by 11:30 the funeral procession will leave for the cemeteries, and we know that it will be for different cemeteries. There's Jacobstop Cemetery and Vanderbijlpark Cemetery, and I can say now that the program is starting with the mayor of Emfuleni municipality. And